A lot of doctors often write and talk about in videos how taking nutritional supplements is a waste of time for people because you can get all the nutrients you need in a balanced diet. If that was the case, then really nobody would be suffering a nutritional deficiency. Yet the truth of the matter is, a lot of people are not ingesting enough of certain essential nutrients. So in this video, I want to talk about a couple of the more common nutrients that are lacking in most people's diet. So I want to start off with iron deficiency. Iron, of course, is a mineral. It's an essential mineral, and it works in the body mainly because it's a component of red blood cells. Iron is needed to carry oxygen and hemoglobin, which is a protein that carries basically in red blood cells. It's a protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen. Iron is needed for the production of hemoglobin, and when you don't have enough iron, you get a type of iron deficiency anemia. There's two basic dietary types of iron. One's called heme iron. This is a very absorbable iron. It's found in stuff like animal protein, red meat, and in fact it's only an animal protein. The other type is called non-heme iron. This is found in some animal and mostly plant foods. It's not as easily absorbed as heme iron. A lot of women who don't like to eat animal proteins like meat, they depend on vegetables and fruits and all that stuff to get their iron. Unfortunately, the heme iron is not as absorbable, and women have a higher requirement for iron for reasons I'll get into in a minute or two. But the point being, if you do ingest foods that contain non-heme iron, like let's say certain plant foods, if you ingest it with a little extra vitamin C, the vitamin C will help convert the non-heme iron into heme iron. So that's a little trick that works. But iron deficiency is actually one of the most common nutritional deficiencies in the world. A quarter of the world's population, 25% of people around the world, are deficient in iron. Young kids are especially deficient in iron, with about half of preschool kids are lacking iron. 30% of menstruating women are deficient in iron due to monthly blood loss. Men, by the way, do not ever need to supplement iron unless you're experiencing something like internal bleeding or you're losing a lot of blood. And that, if you're experiencing that, you've got bigger problems than an iron deficiency. But in men, iron tends to be recirculated. Let me repeat, men do not need to supplement with iron. The body recirculates it. Not so with women. Women lose iron each month due to menstrual losses. 42% of young pregnant women may be deficient in iron. As I said, vegetarians and vegans are at higher risk for iron deficiency because they consume mainly non-heme iron, which isn't absorbed as well as heme iron, unless they take that vitamin C trick I told you. So what are the symptoms of iron deficiency? First, the most common symptom is feeling tired all the time. Just feel weak. Your immune system goes down. Very important in this age of COVID. Iron is needed to support immunity. Without enough iron, your immune system gets weak and the COVID vaccinations won't work as well. You also have impaired brain function and impaired thyroid function. And also iron is needed for the synthesis of carnitine, so even fat burning will be impaired. What are the best sources of heme iron? Red meat. 3 ounces of ground beef supply 30% of their daily requirement of iron. Organ meat. 1 slice of liver gives 50% of the requirements of iron. Shellfish, clams, mussels, oysters, they give you about 50% of the requirement for iron. Even canned sardines can give you 30% of the recommended daily amount of iron. As far as non-heme iron, beans contain 33% of the iron requirement. Seeds, dark leafy green vegetables. So that's about it for iron. The next one that's most likely to be deficient is iodine. Until the introduction of iodized salt, iodine deficiency was very, very common because there isn't that many foods. Seafood, certain foods are rich in iodine. It's a little harder to get. But once they introduce iodized salt, which of course is salt with added iodine, the degree of iodine deficiency dropped tremendously. However, because of the stigma on salt, people are using a lot less salt, and iodine deficiency is making a comeback. What is iodine used for? Mainly for the production of thyroid hormone. 2/3 of your thyroid hormones are made of iodine. The other third is the amino acid tyrosine. Without iodine, you don't have a good thyroid output. And thyroid, of course, controls a lot of body processes, growth, brain development, and metabolic rate. A third of the world's population, mainly third world countries, are deficient in iron even today. Again, because this, the most common symptom of iron deficiency is what they call a goiter, which is you get this big enlarged thyroid gland. Look, you get this like big lump in your neck. What happens there is the thyroid gland is so lacking in iodine it actually expands or hypertrophies in an effort to try and trap more iron. It's desperately, not iron, iodine. It's desperately seeking more iodine. And when you have that, it can cause an increase in heart rate, shortness of breath, and weight gain, of course, because when you gain weight, because your metabolism drops down to nothing because your thyroid output's low. What's the good dietary sources of iodine? Seaweed, kelp. When I was in bodybuilding competition, I've written this in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, a lot of us use kelp as a cutting supplement because of the iodine content. We knew that iodine was needed for the production of thyroid hormone, and the idea was that by ingesting kelp, you would speed up your thyroid output and help you burn fat. Now, what we didn't know at the time was an excess iodine follows the law of hormesis, meaning a little bit of something is good. Once you go past a certain point, it inverts and starts to become bad. And that's true with kelp and iodine. If you take too much iodine, the iodine will actually slow down and inhibit thyroid output. I was taking 50 kelp a day when I was training for contests. I'm not really sure how much it hurt me or helped me. I can't really say, but the point I know today is what I was doing was wrong. I was getting way too much iodine. Fish, as you might expect, is a good source of iodine. 3 ounces of baked cod will give you 66% of the daily requirement of iodine. Even yogurt, a cup of yogurt will give you 50% of the iodine you need. 1 egg contains 16% of the requirement of iodine, only in the yolk, not in the white. If you throw away the yolk, you're not getting the iodine at all. The amounts of iodine found in these foods can vary depending on the soil. Ocean water, iodine-poor soil will result in low iodine food. And of course, there's always the iodized salt, which is, you can use that also. But I actually take a little bit of iodine each day as a supplement. I take only 1 kelp. It's like a super kelp tablet, has 1,000 micrograms of iodine. I take that once a day because I eat a pretty good amount of what they call cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, a couple of others. They contain what they call natural goitrogens, which tend to lock onto the iron that you ingest and prevent it from being absorbed into the thyroid gland. Theoretically, could give you an iodine deficiency. You'd actually have to eat several pounds a day of these vegetables. I'm talking like 8-9 pounds of these vegetables to have that effect. I don't come close to that. I don't even eat a pound of these vegetables. But just for safety's sake, I take this because I don't use iodized salt. I take this iodine supplement. You don't really need to take it. I just do it. Probably overkill, but just saying. I've talked about this many times in past videos. Very common nutrient deficiency, vitamin D. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. It's actually almost like a steroid hormone. Vitamin D is actually a hormone precursor. The vitamin D, it's converted in the liver and kidneys into 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, which is almost, again, like a steroid hormone. It's more of a hormone than a nutrient once that conversion takes place. When you expose your body to the sun, where most of your upper body is exposed for 20 minutes, the ultraviolet rays of the sun will convert the cholesterol in your skin into vitamin D. As much as 20,000 units can be made. Most of it will be destroyed, but you still can get enough vitamin D just from exposure to the sun. However, the sun has to be in the right spot in the sky to emit the correct wavelength of UV rays that stimulates that cholesterol conversion. Also, if you have a lot of body fat, the vitamin D will be made in your skin will be sequestered in fat, not released into the cells. If you're older, it's difficult to make the conversion of cholesterol into vitamin D. And also, if you have darker skin, it's hard to make the vitamin D from the sun exposure. In the United States, about 42% are said to be deficient in the vitamin. I think it's much higher than that. It's actually 74% of older adults are deficient in D. 82% of people with dark skin, for the reasons I just said, are also deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D is a little bit more difficult, not a little, a lot more difficult to get in foods than other nutrients, found in very small amounts in food. The most reliable way to get vitamin D, if you're not going to go in the sun or can't go in the sun, or the sun's not in the right place in the sky, is to simply take a vitamin D supplement. They're little tiny capsules, tiny. A baby could swallow them. They're not those big horse capsules that people are afraid of. These little tiny things. You can get them in I take one that contains 2,400 units in each capsule. I take 2 a day with a meal containing fat. Has to be taken with fat. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. If you don't take it with fat, most of it passes right through the body. A lot of the studies that said that showing that vitamin D doesn't do anything, like the more recent studies where they tested vitamin D as a preventive nutrient against COVID-19, some of the studies came out null, meaning they found no effect. You read the studies, they gave the vitamin D with a glass of water, which is absolutely idiotic. When you give it a glass of water, it just passes right through you. Of course, it's not going to do anything. But I don't know why they do it, but they do it. The deficiency signs of vitamin D are much more subtle. Adults who are deficient in vitamin D, you can get muscle weakness. You do have vitamin D receptors in the muscle. It's involved, especially in older people. A lot of people, older people who are deficient in vitamin D, if they give them vitamin D, they actually get stronger and their muscles grow. It's only if you're deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D also has an interaction with testosterone. If you're low in testosterone, not if you have normal levels, if you're low in testosterone, and you're deficient in D, if you take D, your testosterone levels go up. If you have normal testosterone levels, the D is not going to do anything for you. And children of a lack of vitamin D causes a disease called Rickets. Famous Mr. Olympia, friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Colombo. If you ever watched him walk, he was slightly bow-legged. That was from childhood rickets. He had rickets as a child, and it made him permanently bow-legged. Also, Franco had this unusual cut, or deep, it looked like a deep cut right through the top of his chest, that people would always wonder how he got that. Arnold told me himself that was also a result of bone malformation due to Franco having rickets as a child, and as his chest bones didn't develop, and the way the muscle attached to the chest, it gave him that weird line across the chest. You can't develop that. It was from a nutritional disease. Vitamin D, as I said, it definitely needed for immune function. T cells, which protect you against viruses and bacteria and incipient cancers in the body, need vitamin D to be activated. Without vitamin D, you have an increased risk of cancer. If you want to try and get it from food, the best sources are cod liver oil. A single tablespoon contains 227% of the daily requirement of D. If you eat a lot of fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, not only are you getting omega-3, but you're also getting a pretty good amount of vitamin D. A 3-ounce serving of cooked salmon provides 75% of the daily requirement of vitamin D. I've seen a couple of blogs where they say you don't need to take vitamin D if you eat eggs. Egg yolks contain vitamin D. How much? One egg yolk contains 7% of the daily requirement of vitamin D. So figure out how much eggs you have to eat to get even the minimal daily requirement of D. I'll leave it at that. Let's move on to the next nutrient that people are likely deficient in, vitamin B12, also known as cobalamin. Vitamin B12 is not only the largest vitamin of all, it's the only vitamin that actually contains a mineral, cobalt. And the thing about vitamin, a lot of people take vitamin D injections. It's been going on, as long as I've been in bodybuilding. This is like over 50 years. Many people get vitamin, or give themselves, or get it from a doctor, vitamin B12 injections because they think it's going to give them a lot more energy. And guess what? If you're deficient in vitamin B12, it will. But you could also take vitamin D a lot easier in a sublingual form. But they did a study where they compared sublingual supplemental vitamin D and just where you swallow the vitamin D. There was no difference. Vitamin B12. There was no difference in vitamin B12 level between the two. Vegetarians, vegans, especially vegans, are more likely to be deficient in B12 because it's mainly, B12 is only found naturally in animal foods, with the exception of one type of some rare type of seaweed contains. But some of the other vegetable sources that I've seen listed online as being source of B12 contain what they call a false B12, meaning it structurally looks like vitamin B12, but it doesn't have any B12 activity in the body. So if vegans, depend on these type of sources for vitamin B12, they will be deficient. Studies indicate that 80 to 90% of vegetarians and vegans may be deficient in B12. 90%. More than 20% of older adults may also be deficient. And the reason for that is to be absorbed. Remember I said that vitamin B12 is the most complex vitamin of all. And because of that, it requires unusual uptake mechanisms. The stomach produces a protein known as intrinsic factor. It's produced from the lining of the stomach, and and the secretion of acid in the stomach stimulates the release of intrinsic factor. When you ingest vitamin B12, the intrinsic factor kind of locks onto the B12 and allows it to be absorbed. Unfortunately, when older people get older, they don't make as much stomach acid. It's called achlorhydria, and because of that, the intrinsic factor also becomes less active. So even if they take vitamin B12 in food, it won't be absorbed without the intrinsic factor. So these people might actually need a B12 injection or some other way of taking it. The most common symptom of B12 deficiency is a type of anemia called Megaloblastic Anemia, characterized by much larger than usual red blood cells. Also, a lack of B12 affects brain function. You get what they call white matter intensities, where basically, to make it real simple without going into extreme anatomical detail, when you lack vitamin D, I keep saying D, when you lack vitamin B12, your brain literally shrinks, and that ain't good, trust me. Also, vitamin B12 is needed for the metabolism of a amino acid byproduct produced from the amino acid methionine called homocysteine, which could be very toxic for a lot of reasons, which I will discuss in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. What's the dietary sources of B12? Shellfish, clams, and oysters. Cooked clams provides 1,400% of the requirement. Organ meat, 1,000% of the, only 2 ounces provides 1,000% of the daily requirement of B12. Meat, 170-gram beef steak offers 150% of the daily requirement. 1 egg gives you 6%. 1 whole egg, again, the yolk. Again, anytime all the nutrients in an egg are in the yolk, when you throw away the yolk and eat only the white, all you're getting is protein, nothing else. All the nutrients are in the yolk, including B12. A cup of milk contains 18% of the requirement of B12. Another common deficiency, especially among women and people that avoid dairy products, calcium. Calcium, of course, an essential mineral needed for bone mass, teeth. It's needed for growth. It's also a signaling molecule. Calcium, in other words, what it does, without calcium, your body needs calcium for your heart, muscles, and nerves to be able to function. Calcium is needed for muscle contraction. If you're lacking in calcium, your muscles won't contract and you won't have enough strength and you'll be much weaker than normal. The calcium concentration in your blood is tightly regulated. Any excess is stored in bones. However, if you take, for example, a lot of vitamin D, there's a chance where you might get such increased calcium uptake, because vitamin D increases calcium uptake. There's a chance that some of the calcium could be diverted into your arteries, which is not good. You know, that's basically hardening of the arteries. To prevent that, you want to take, I'm only talking if you're taking huge amounts of D. I'm talking about 10,000 units or more a day. You want to take a vitamin K supplement. The vitamin K supplement will kind of divert the calcium from the arterial linings back into the bone where it's supposed to be. It'll keep you safe. The most common symptom of the long-term calcium deficiency is osteoporosis, which is a thinning and weakening of the bones. Usually happens in more common in women, because osteoporosis is also related to not only a calcium deficiency but a deficiency of estrogen. Women past menopause, again, produce less estrogen, more prone to osteoporosis. They're usually very small women. I call them bird women because they're usually very small and they have these tiny, tiny bones. Those are the women most prone to osteoporosis. And here's something you women should know. Osteoporosis begins at 30 years of age. It often isn't manifested until you're like 60 or older, where you'll be walking up a flight of stairs and suddenly your hip breaks and you fall down the stairs. Actually, the reason your hip broke was from osteoporosis that you didn't even know you had. A survey in the United States found that fewer than 15% of teenage girls, 10% of women over 50, and fewer than 22% of teenage boys and men over 50 met even the minimum daily requirement of calcium. What is that? In men, it's about 1,100 milligrams of calcium. Women, it's 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams. So if you're going to supplement with calcium, the best source is calcium citrate. All other supplemental sources of calcium require acid to be secreted, meaning you have to take the calcium with a meal. If you take calcium citrate, you can take it with a glass of water. You can take it any time. Dietary sources of calcium: bone fish. 1 can of sardines contains 44% of the requirement of calcium. A cup of milk provides 35%. Kale, spinach, bok choy, the cruciferous vegetables, they all have calcium. 5.6%, nothing to rave about. Some studies have indicated, just to be complete, that if you take calcium supplements, you have an increased risk of heart disease. But there's many other studies that looked into it and found no effect. So that's kind of up in the air. I personally don't think so. I think the reason you would have calcium problems related to heart disease is because of misplaced calcium, meaning the calcium winds up in your coronary arteries and sets you up, it's involved with atherosclerosis. Again, that could be prevented by taking other nutrients that modify calcium metabolism. Vitamin K and magnesium in particular will prevent that kind of stuff. Vitamin A is another deficiency. The biggest cause of worldwide blindness is a vitamin A deficiency. It's another fat-soluble vitamin. It's needed for healthy skin, teeth, bones, and cell membranes. And again, those eye pigments, which vitamin D is needed to produce, are required for vision. There's 2 kinds of vitamin dietary A. One is called preformed A. That's the kind found in animal products like meat, fish, poultry, and dairy. Then you have provitamin A. That's found in plant-based foods. Example of provitamin A would be beta-carotene, meaning that your body can convert beta-carotene into vitamin A. However, this doesn't happen in diabetics. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of doctors don't know that. Diabetics cannot convert beta-carotene into vitamin A. If they're depending on like vegetables and stuff for their vitamin A, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to need to take a separate preformed vitamin A supplement. More than 75% of people who eat a Western diet get more than enough vitamin A, so it's not really that common, but it's more common in developing countries and young children, and again, it's the world's leading cause of blindness. I'm talking about a deficiency of vitamin A. Vitamin A, if you're lacking it can depress immune function, again, very dangerous in this land of COVID now, and it could also increase mortality, especially among children and pregnant women. The best sources of preformed A include organ meat. 2-ounce slice of beef liver contains 800% of the daily requirement. Fish liver oil contains 500% of daily requirement. Beta-carotene, sweet potatoes contain 150%. Carrots, 75%. Green leafy vegetables, 18%. Another common deficiency, I've talked about this in several videos, magnesium. It's essential for bone and teeth structure. It's involved in more than 300 enzymatic reactions. They estimate that half the population in the U.S. consumes less than the required amount of magnesium, which is about 400 milligrams a day. A low intake and blood levels of magnesium are associated with type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, and osteoporosis. Low levels are particularly common among hospital patients. The nutrients they give you in the hospital, they don't contain magnesium. So if you're in the hospital and you're depending on hospital food, if you're in there any length of time, you're going to get a magnesium deficiency. It can also be caused by various diseases, certain drugs, reduced digestive function, and of course inadequate intake of magnesium. The main symptoms include symptoms of magnesium deficiency include abnormal heart rhythm or arrhythmias, muscle cramps, restless leg syndrome, fatigue, and migraines. But magnesium is needed, by the way, to activate ATP, the most elemental source of energy in the body. Without magnesium, ATP doesn't work right. Your energy is going to drop. Fatigue is going to go way up. Best sources of magnesium include whole grains. A cup of oats contains 74% of the daily requirement. 20 almonds have 17% of the daily requirement of magnesium. 1 ounce of dark chocolate contains 15% of the requirement. Green leafy vegetables, 6%. So that's about it for, there's other nutrients I could discuss that are common. I did mention the omega-3 fatty acids. I mentioned them in passing, but that's also a very, very common nutritional deficiency. If you don't eat fatty fish like sardines, halibut, mackerel, I said sardines, anchovies. If you don't have that type of fish 2 or 3 times a week, you're almost guaranteed to be lacking in omega-3s. Your option there is to take a fish oil supplement. I would suggest a liquid supplement, otherwise you have to swallow too many capsules. I take a liquid fish oil supplement. I take 2 tablespoons, 1 tablespoon twice a day, and it gives me about 5 grams of omega-3. So that's about it. I'll be discussing these nutrients in much more detail in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, much greater detail. All these videos, you have to understand, they're just an overview. I can't go into detail because of time constraints. This isn't a podcast, and I honestly wouldn't want to bore people by talking for 4 straight hours on this stuff. I find it hard to believe anyone could keep their interest out that long. So if you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, ergogenic aids, anti-aging research you can use today, fat loss techniques that really work, hormonal therapy, women's health and fitness, and many other topics. I cover more topics than any other digital publication on the internet. Subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, medicine, and general health. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics website where current subscribers only can send me short questions, which I'll be happy to answer as a bonus for them having subscribed. I don't answer any unsolicited questions. My main focus of attention is to the people that are supporting my work. The other people can look it up on their own. I'm giving all my attention to only the subscribers, not non-subscribers. I'm not an unpaid consultant. And by the way, it costs almost nothing to subscribe to Applied Metabolics compared to other digital. There's one digital publication that charges, are you ready for this? $250 a month. I charge $10 a month, and I get like 40 times more information in each issue. And I'm a professional writer with 40 years of experience. I write in a style that's easily understandable. It's what they call magazine style, because I was a magazine writer for 35 years. I know how to communicate with the public, unlike these other digital publications which read, I've seen them, they read like medical journals. They're very hard to read. They use all these technical expressions that make you cross-eyed after about 20 minutes. I compare reading to them to wait, similar to wading through thick mud. Wading, W-A-D-I-N-G, wading through thick mud. They're not fun to read. I mean, they're accurate. I mean, the information is knowledgeable, but, if you want to go to sleep, subscribe to them. You won't get that with Applied Metabolics. I have little stories and anecdotes about the golden days of bodybuilding, how, the days of me training with Arnold Schwarzenegger, other famous greats of the day. I try to make it entertaining and informative as I can. So subscribe today. Again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. How do you like my shirt? I don't care who dies in a movie as long as the dog lives. And I really feel that way. I hate movies where the dog dies. It makes me cry, seriously. If you want to have the best friend you ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. Take care.